I went into this morning, but I want to revisit it in more detail without necessarily revisiting my, my high school romances one more time. But the basic dilemma in divorce with children, if I might say this, if you don't have kids, I don't care how you divorce, you know, go for the jugular if you don't have kids. Right? It's if you have kids, that's what requires a different way to end this relationship. As we said this morning, I see the basic dilemma in divorce is that most people or many people who get divorced want to end their marriage, their relationship, the natural way. They want to say, I'm never going to see you again. And as we looked at, that can mean and does mean never seeing the kids again. I also hope I showed you a little bit, looking at the 12-year outcomes with mediation, that we changed this picture. That when parents can end a relationship in a different way, they can preserve their relationship with their children. Right? It's I'm never going to see you again. So this isn't an inevitable outcome, but again, it's really important for us to keep in mind that we're asking parents to do something that's emotionally unnatural. Right? We're asking them to do something that's hard. Right? Anger serves lots of functions. And one function it serves, as we're going to talk about, is warding off pain. And it's when a parent is able to succeed in putting their kids first and their own emotions second, I have nothing to do but to applaud them. And the second edition of Renegotiating Family Relationships, I dedicated it to every parent who's able to put aside their own emotions for their children's sake, and to every child whose parents fail to do that. Right? I want to revisit this slide that we were looking at this morning, because much of working with divorced families, and certainly much of working with mediation, has to do with dealing with anger. People are angry in divorce. They have many good objective reasons to be angry. They also have good emotional reasons as well. Again, part of the anger has to do with hurt. When you stub your toe, you yell at the table, right? You're acting angry. How you're really feeling is hurt. When you're sitting in a mediator's office, this scenario has played out dozens upon dozens of times in my mediations. This is what can happen. You go through a little beginning process, which I'm going to detail for you in a while to start the first session. But after laying the ground rules, some of the basics about how mediation is going to work, I'll say to the couple in front of me, so tell me what brings you in here today. You know, inevitably that, or almost inevitably, that leads to a fight, to an argument. And usually, oftentimes, it's an argument around one person has left the relationship and another person doesn't want the relationship to end. My prototype example for this is, this case stays with me, even though it was, gosh, I don't know, 8 years ago, is a young couple in my office. Details are changed here to protect confidentiality, but the essence is there. The wife was a receptionist, had wanted to end the relationship for a long period of time, wasn't sure how to tell her husband that she wanted out. You know, finally got around, you know, laid some plans, laid some groundwork, put a little bit of money away, because she was scared of what was going to happen, and finally told him that she was going to leave. The husband, who worked in a factory, didn't want this to happen, and as oftentimes happened, you know, maybe he should have recognized the signs. He certainly wasn't the most sensitive guy in the world, But when she finally said she was going to leave, he felt like he was blindsided. He had no idea this was coming. This is something for her that she'd been thinking about for a long period of time. Anyway, get back to the hurt and anger. In this first session, of course, I don't know any of this, although I'm expecting this. A lot of the time, it's as we're going to talk about, it's the one-sided divorces that get emotionally complicated, like this one. And so what brings you in here? And the wife goes on, and it's like, well, we just need to work things out. We've been to court, and we have a 12-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy, and we need to have a schedule with him. He is alienating my son from me. He's telling my son is like, not wanting to see me because he is alienating him, and I'm trying to take him to court, but they said we should go to mediation and help work this out. So we've just got to get these things worked out. And he jumps in and says, I'm not alienating him from you, right? He sees you for what you are. He sees that you're a no good, and we get a long string of swear words. This guy, by the way, she's kind of a smallish, mild-looking young woman, probably early 30s. He's got his baseball cap turned around backwards, tattoos up and down his arms, big, broad shoulders, probably 200, 210 pounds. And when he's yelling loud. Okay. This is where I invite you to come and join me in doing mediation, sitting in the room with these two people. Why I invite you to join me in that very uncomfortable spot is, again, because this is where their kids are sitting, right in the middle between this. I let this go on for a while. By the way, oftentimes my technique for controlling anger, at least early in the process, is not to control it. I let people fight for a while, and often, as long as it doesn't get out of control, they'll turn to me in exasperation like, see, what am I going to do? And then I'll say something like, well, so is this the way things are usually going, right? Something's got to change. Turn the focus on the kids. I wait for them to invite me into the conflict rather than trying to control it right at the very beginning. That wasn't working in this case. This guy was loud and out of control, and I had to do my more like, okay, look it. This isn't the way this is supposed to go, right? I set up some ground rules about how things are supposed to go, which I'm going to explain to you in just a second. We need to get back at those. It's time to call a timeout. I call a timeout. I make up a story, which I oftentimes do, because I really want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to her. I say to her, look, you're closest to the door. Do you mind stepping out for a second? She's there, not at all, right? She's glad to get out of the room. I turn to the guy, big guy, furious looking, right? Furious looking. I said to him, you may want to write this down. Certainly the legal professionals do. I say to him, you seem angry, okay? Reflective listening. Remember we're talking about reflective. You seem angry. And he goes, you bet I'm angry. And before he can get off into his tirade, I say, but I think something else is going on. And he looks at me, and in like 10 seconds, he's in tears. He's in tears. I can't believe she's leaving me. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? She's been the love of my life. I had a scholarship. I could have gone to college. I had a scholarship to play football. And instead of doing that, instead of going to college, I married her. We got married the week after we graduated from high school. And she was pregnant 3 months later. And I gave it up for her. I'm working in this friggin' factory because of her. But I don't care. I don't do that. I just want my family. I just want her. I just want her back. This can't be happening. What am I supposed to do? What happened? Think about that for a second now. You're in this first appointment. You're with him. Rather than head on, like me doing, like, okay, I'm going to be more bigger and tougher and stronger and dominate you. Rather than taking the anger head on, I go behind the anger. I look for the hurt and the pain that's behind it. I undo his resistance, right, to the situation. I actually, all of a sudden, this guy who was honestly not only scaring me, who I was thinking to myself, I'd like to go out in the waiting room with your wife, you know, leave you here alone. All of a sudden, I feel for the guy, right? He's hurting, and he gives me something that I can work with. I could say to him, God, this is really hard for you, isn't it? I can use all those therapy, reflective listening skills, right? But I could say, you know, I'm really sorry. You've got to find a way to help you to cope with this. I don't do the therapy with him there. It's not therapy, it's mediation. But I might, if it's the right sort of person, I might refer him to therapy. If it's not the right person, you know, who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? Do you have a buddy? I'd never talk to a guy about this. What about your mom? No, my mom is too biased. She just starts. Well, you know, what about a priest? What about a minister? You know, explore some options, right? Because this is a guy who's not going to go to therapy. But then I'll say, but we've got something else. We've got a job to do here, right? Because there's somebody else that's hurting, and it's your kids, right? And I understand you're being hurt, but we got to find a way to protect the kids. We got to find a way to keep them out from under it. That little example is both a specific example of how I handle that first session. Probably half the time is a scenario like that, where it's specifically related to a lever and a left, as we're going to get into, and one person wanting in the relationship and one person wanting out, and they're fighting about the kids, but they're not really fighting about the kids. Yeah, they're fighting about the end of the relationship. He had said to her earlier, he said, you know, you can leave me if you want, but let me tell you, you're never going to see your son again. Right? Trying to make things so bad that she won't leave. Right? Now, I could take that head on and say, well, she has a legal right to see her son, you know, and you're alienating. Or I could go behind it and get to the emotion, to the real feeling behind it. And that's the second thing that this illustrates, is the way I always deal with anger is to look for the emotion behind it. Very often the emotion behind anger is hurt and pain, like it was for this guy, like it is with stubbing your toe. Oftentimes the emotion behind anger is love and longing. And actually, sometimes it's more than one of these things, because part of what he was trying to do was to hang on. Think about this for a second. In Renegotiating Family Relationships, I lay this all out more formally than I'm going to here. But I'm sure many of you are familiar with attachment theory. Attachment theory has to do with that special bond that forms between an infant and a caregiver, right? Even if you're not familiar with attachment theory, think about a toddler, right? A toddler exploring off from mom or dad, right? And if the parent is a secure base, the toddler will go off and explore the world and periodically look back and say, oh, is mom there, right there? And maybe get scared and come running back and hug her and then go exploring off again. That's what attachment looks like. And there's a whole good biologically based theory behind this. Now what happens when the toddler turns around to get scared, turns around to see mom, mom's not there, right? Mom has disappeared. Maybe he's wandered too far. Maybe mom hasn't been paying attention. He'll get anxious, still doesn't find her. Then what does the toddler do? Mommy, mommy, where are you? Right? If they verbally. He'll get mad. John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, called it protest. He's not mad because he's angry. His anger is what attachment theorists call reunion behavior. Much of the fighting in divorce is also a form of reunion behavior. It's a way of keeping in touch, of maintaining contact. Sometimes what's going on behind the anger is hurt and pain. Sometimes it's a way of keeping in contact, of keeping in touch. Think about it. If you break up with somebody and they say, okay, fine, they don't show much emotional investment. If they say, I'm going to kill you, that's a sign of their connection. So sometimes the emotion behind anger is hurt. It's not maybe the healthiest sign, but it's a sign. Sometimes it's love. Another emotion behind anger that comes up a lot is fear. You ever hear of fight or flight? Right? That basic, again, these all are biologically based emotion responses. You know, doing this work has made me appreciate how subcortical people are. It's like a lot of times people in divorce are behaving like decorticate animals. It's like you can't use your whole brain. You're just responding with your reptilian brain. It's all basic emotional stuff. You're acting angry, but what you really are is afraid. This comes up a lot in mediation when you're about to write an agreement. And you know, you've got everything carefully worked out, all the schedule for the kids, and you're ready to sign off on the agreement, and you just have to negotiate about who's going to get Aunt Sally's painting from the basement. And as you're like, forget it. If I can't have Aunt Sally's painting, it's all off. Well, you can't have Aunt Sally's painting. I want it. You know, are they really fighting about Aunt Sally's painting at the end? No. What they're doing is they're about to sign off. They're afraid they're going to make a mistake. If you focus on the anger, you get nowhere. If you go underneath it and you focus on the fear, you have an answer to the problem. Same thing comes up when you're buying a house, right? And you do the inspection, and you come up with 101 reasons what's wrong with the inspection report. And boy, you better give me this. It's not about, you know, repainting the door on the third floor, right? It's really about the anxiety of making a big decision. A lot of what's behind anger is guilt. And as we're going to get to, and I want to focus on, the big thing behind anger is grief and longing. But let me get there. Talk about it more formally. This stuff, this is what mediation is all about. This is the hard part. If you take emotions out of a divorce situation, really working out the details of a schedule, working out how to parent isn't so complicated. You know, I've had, in the course of doing this work, I've had this happen to me. A couple comes to me, look, we're separating, we want to get divorced. 5 years ago, we realized that we had problems in our marriage. We went to see a couples therapist, went to see them for a year. That helped us some. We learned a lot about ourselves, but we still weren't happy. So we stopped couples therapy. At the couples therapist's recommendation, we each went into individual therapy and learned a lot from individual therapy, hoping that was going to help us to save our marriage. Each were in individual therapy for a couple of years. As a matter of fact, I'm still in therapy with them. Helped a lot, but even after 2 years of individual therapy, we decided things weren't better in our marriage. We struggled for another year to keep it together, and then we finally decided that we didn't want to make it work. We need to separate. And for the last year, we've been talking about separating, trying to figure out the best way to do it, right? And we heard about mediation, and we're here for you to help us to work out what's best. I love those people, right? I love those people. But they're in my office for about 5 minutes because they've really got it all worked out. It's the emotional stuff. They've got the emotions gone. It's the ones in my office like the other guy. Somebody's just had an affair, right? Somebody just learned suddenly that their spouse wants out. That's the complicated part. It's the ones where the things behind the anger are driving the situation. Why bother to deal with this? You know, sometimes I do just want to tell the guy to go to court, but it's to protect kids. Of all the emotions behind anger, the hurt, the pain, the love and longing, the fear and anxiety, the guilt, here is the big one, is grief. Everybody talks about there being lots of good reasons to be angry in divorce. There's also lots of good reasons to be sad. And unfortunately, people don't talk about that enough. And you need to be aware of that in working with your clients, whether it's in mediation or elsewhere, and give them at least a little inkling into their grief and grieving. If you think about it for a second, what you might lose in a divorce. Well, you lose your role as a husband and wife, right? You don't feel so much like a mom or a dad either. And you might be afraid that you're losing your kids. You're losing your lover, maybe your best friend, right? Oftentimes you're losing your home. You're almost certainly losing a bunch of your money. Think of what happens to friends. Friends tend to divide up when you divorce, right? You lose, a lot of times both of you lose your friends, or friends take one side or the other. Same thing with your family, your relatives. You might have been really close to your mother and father-in-law. They're likely to be gone. And I think at the core of it, divorce is the loss of hopes and dreams. We may be cynical, we may think we're being realistic in these days where divorce is so common, where Hollywood divorces happen every other day, where so many kids are born outside of marriage and so on, but most of us still buy into that Cinderella Prince Charming fantasy, that our lives are going to be happily ever after. And divorce is the crushing loss of those hopes and dreams. The reason why you're looking at elephants as I'm talking about the losses in divorce is because when you lose things that you're connected with, you grieve. Even elephants grieve. Right? These are pictures of, at top is a mother elephant in the savannah in Africa. This is from a book by Diane Moss called Elephant Memories. Her baby has died, and she is standing there repeatedly trying to get the baby to stand back up, to be alive. I think even more poignantly, you can't see it so well, but the bottom picture is an adolescent elephant. What that adolescent elephant is doing is fondling the skull and tusks of its long dead mother. Apparently elephants on the savannah, they roam around during the course of the year, but they'll revisit the same place from year to year. And according to Moss, they'll go back and kind of pay ritual to the lost loved one, even a year later. When we lose things, we grieve. Grief is a normal and a natural and healthy reaction to loss. And nobody is talking about grief in divorce, or not enough people. I am, obviously, right? There's other problems too. We have our familiar models of grief, because most of us are familiar with grief through loss of a loved one through death. And some of you may be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's ideas, stages of grief, the 5 stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Her work is actually very closely based on Bowlby's work from attachment theory. And many people find this to be a helpful description of grieving following death. Although it's certainly true that there are many different ways to grieve even following the death. But that's not what I want to focus on. There's particular issues and particular problems that come up with grieving divorce. First of all, people don't recognize that they're grieving, right? When somebody dumps you, your focus is on the hurt, on the pain, on the anger. Yes, you might cry alone at night, right? But nobody's helping you to structure this idea. You don't realize that you're grieving. A lot of times when I'm working with somebody in mediation or in therapy, rather than tell somebody I think they're grieving, I'll say to them, have you ever felt anything like this before? To get them to understand and explore their own feelings. And I hear over and over again, yeah, when I was, it was awful. When I was 13 years old, my dad died. And it's weird, but I feel a lot like that, except this is just crazier. This is worse. I hate to say it, this is even worse though. Aha, there's your grief. Right? I think it's important to let people discover these insights for themselves rather than impose it on them. Even if you recognize that you're grieving, so the first thing is just recognizing it. Then if you recognize it, who are you going to grieve with? Think about the rituals we develop following the death of a loved one. If you grew up, I grew up in an extended Italian-American family. Everybody worked in the same business. Everybody's life was in each other's business, you know. And when somebody in the family died, everybody would gather together, bring way too much food, right, to each other. My family was all in the liquor business, so you'd drink way too much, right? And you'd get together, and you'd laugh, and you'd cry, and you'd relive memories. My family tradition was to have an open casket at a wake, as I think a very concrete reminder that there's an end here, that it's over. And also because it provokes strong emotions to see the loved one more time. Where's the ritual to encourage and promote and support grieving and divorce? Right? What are you going to do? You're going to get together with your ex-wife or ex-husband? Oh, it's so sad, we're breaking up. Oh. No, that's not going to happen. Right? You know, I don't want most parents grieving with their kids. The kids are grieving differently. And again, I don't want kids to be the parents' emotional support, although I do want parents to say it's okay for you to be sad, but it's not the kid's job to support you in your grief, right? You know, in your friends and family, come on, you've heard this, you've probably said this. They go for the easy stuff. You know, I never really liked him anyway. You're going to be better off without her, right? They encourage the anger. They don't encourage the sadness. You know, who are you going to grieve with? You know, and here is the big issue. Here is the big issue, is that grief doesn't go in a straight line, right? Kubler-Ross's, Bowlby's model of grief, any stage model of grief doesn't fit divorce, right? Doesn't fit grief, and divorce doesn't fit grief in any potentially revocable loss. Because why should I grieve? She's going to come back. And if I let go, I'm not going to give up hope. He's just having a crazy affair. He's going to come to his senses. He'll be back to me. He'll never do this to me and his kids. Grieve. Oh, I'm just waiting for him to wake up, come to his senses. That makes grief different. And based on my clinical work, I developed a theory of grief, not of grieving in stages, but of grieving in cycles. And let me, if I can, describe this to you. The cycle is going through cycles of swings, emotional swings between feelings of love, between feelings of anger, and feelings of sadness. Let me give you another little example. Not that long ago, I had a woman call me up for couples therapy, desperate. She called me up and said, you know, my husband, you got to see me tomorrow. My husband came home from work, or he's gone for the weekend. He came home and he says, you know, he wants a divorce. And this is just like coming completely out of the clear blue sky. You know, I don't know what's going to be happening. Can you see us in couples therapy tomorrow? It's got to do it. I agree to see him in couples therapy. I meet with them, and sure enough, the husband had been, showed no signs of problems in the marriage, came home after being gone for a weekend and said that I want a divorce. But there was more complications here. This was actually a husband who had been a parentified son himself. His single mother, he was the oldest of several boys. His single mother had relied on him for emotional support. He'd taken care of his little brothers too, but what he learned from the lesson of taking care of his mother as a little child was that he didn't have feelings himself, and those couldn't count. And if he did have feelings and was upset, he had to deny them and cover it up. And what had happened in 15 years of marriage, his wife, who suffered from dysthymia, chronic low-level, agitated, angry depression, gave him lots and lots of reasons to be mad. And every time she got mad at him, did something nasty, rejected him, he did, in his words, he sucked it up. He sucked it up, denied his feelings and sucked it up. And after 15 years of sucking it up, he went away for a weekend. He called an old buddy on the telephone. helped him to realize what was going on, and he said, I'm not going to suck it up anymore. I want a divorce. Anyway, saw them in therapy. This all came out. And and the wife actually admitted, says, you know what? I didn't want to admit it to you. I don't think I even wanted to admit it to myself. But yes, I am depressed. I need help. I need to work on this. Saw him another session or two later, and she's there like, I'm feeling so good. I feel like, maybe for the first time in 15 years, we can really have a marriage. I mean, you're finally you're connecting with me. You're finally being open to me. I'm being open to you. I'm admitting to my problems. I just love you so much. I just love you so much. I'm so happy that we've done this, even though it's so painful. Unfortunately, sadly, he said to her, honey, I'm sorry. I told you I would try, but something's broken. It's gone. The feelings I have for you aren't there anymore. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. You want a divorce? All right, buddy. That's what you want. You're going to get it. You're going to pay. You don't know how much you're going to pay. Love to anger, right? And then, as you can well imagine, 5 minutes further into the session, oh, no, this can't be happening. Please don't leave me. Right? Round and round, back and forth. Looking like this over time. At the very beginning of your grief, when you're grieving a potentially revocable loss, you feel one of those emotions incredibly intensely. And when you're really furious, or when you're really longing, or when you're so depressed, the anger and the sadness and the love and longing, those other emotions are outside of your conscious awareness. And you go through these wild swings. Have you ever heard people talk about them being on an emotional roller coaster? This is the emotional roller coaster they're on, right? Back and forth, love and anger. Now, interestingly, time does heal, right? Over time, the swings get less intense. And over time, the emotions actually start to come into phase. So one index that I've come to keep track of, at least from a clinical perspective, of when somebody is getting over their grief, and I don't think you ever get over it completely. I don't think you want to get over it completely, because getting over the bad means letting go of the good too. You want to get contained. But when somebody is getting to the point of being able to contain their grief is when they can look back and say, they can feel all three emotions at the same time. They can look back and say, you know what? When I look back at this, it still makes me angry at what happened. And I feel, I wish it could have worked out, right? It makes me sad to think about what happened. But I have to admit there were some good parts of this relationship, if nothing else, these beautiful kids that we have together. When they can express those three feelings at the same time, and feel the love, the anger, and sadness at the same time, they are getting over their grief, or they're dealing with their grief. How much time?
We have about 45 more minutes.
Okay, all right. Although I was thinking about, that's helpful to know too, I was thinking about how much time does it take to get over your grief, is what I was. People want to know that. Oh, well, I told her I wanted a divorce. I don't need to wait to date, right? Her best friend, why should I wait, right? I want to get over this in a hurry. How much time does it take? Bad news for you, right? If you think about it, how long did we give people to grieve the loss of someone through death? Very common in religious and cultural traditions, about a year. Depending on the loss, but a typical loss will give people about a year. If it's an off-time loss, if you lose a child, parent loses a child, for example, that's going to take longer. But many traditions, like religious traditions, after a year there might even be a ceremony where you say, you're still sad, you're still going to grieve, but it's time for you to move on with your life. The bad news in divorce is it takes longer, right? Because you don't get started. When somebody dies, there's a beginning point, right? You know it's over. That's, I think, again, part of what that open casket's about. When somebody's divorced, you don't know when it's over. I oftentimes say to people in mediation, again and elsewhere, you need to kill this relationship. No, do not murder him, right? Even though I know you want to. In your mind, you need to kill the relationship so you can begin with your grief. And until you do, you don't start grieving. That means it takes people, if it's 12 months to grieve the loss of a death, it's probably a couple of years, maybe 3, to really grieve a divorce. It takes time. It takes more time than people want it to take. You need to give yourself and give your partner that time. Question?
When you see your couples in mediation, do you evaluate the other support systems that are either causing them to be more angry with one another, and are there any rules about how they manage their other relationships or other family members?
Yeah, I try to get people who are going to support the underneath emotions as opposed to the on top anger. And I go into a lot of this in the Truth About Children Divorce specific examples. I also will encourage parents to do this, to come up with a soundbite explanation to give to your friends. Because you know what? So many people that you thought were your friends, they like to stir the pot. Oh, what's happening with your husband? Oh, I feel so bad for you. You know, I saw him out Saturday night. And he had his hands all over her. Boy, she's not being your friend. Right? She's trying to stir it up. She's trying to make herself feel better. So I encourage people to come up with a soundbite explanation. Not to get into, to pick a friend or two who you just let it out completely with. Everybody else, don't give them the fuel. Don't give them anything to stir the pot with.
Includes family members too.
For the most part, the people who are really there to help you, you find out at a time like this. Yeah.
When you say kill the relationship, what do you convey to them that means?
It can mean different things, right? Before you get the idea, before you can grieve, you have to kill the relationship. It can be something very concrete. I've got somebody I'm working with right now who doesn't have kids. Their relationship ended a few months ago. Pictures are still up all around the house, right? You don't take down the pictures if you think he's coming back, right? But one way to kill a relationship can be taking down the pictures and packing them away, something concrete like that. Dividing up pictures of your kids, right? There's, okay, here, you take these because it's over, right? We don't keep these together, and we both want to have some pictures. It can be, it can be more of a mental act of saying to yourself, he's not coming back, It can be, it's time for you to start to date yourself, right? Something to, there's no one magical thing, but there's something to make it begin. And again, more complications come up. Anyway, this is all theoretical, right? As I mentioned this morning, though, when I come up with a good theoretical idea, what I do is I get a graduate student to study it. And that's what I did with this. I had a graduate student several years back now by the name of David Sabara, who hopefully will be watching this. He's now a professor and director of clinical training at University of Arizona. And he took this model and put it to a test. And let me tell you about Dave's studies, because I think it was one of the coolest studies that's been done in my lab in all the years. So we wanted to study grief, but I put an ad in the local newspaper and said, just just divorce your husband or wife? Just tell them you want to leave them? Gee, come to the University of Virginia and participate in a study of grieving divorce. I didn't get a whole lot of people volunteering for that study. So what Dave did is he started what he called the Virginia Dating Study. Picture this. He enrolled hundreds. You had to be dating your boyfriend or girlfriend, I think, for at least 4 months. So it had to be like somewhat substantial relationship. And come into the love lab, and we're going to study your relationship. Well, like I say, hundreds of couples flocked to the Virginia dating study. The Cavalier Daily, which is the Virginia undergraduate newspaper, for 2 or 3 years running on Valentine's Day, which is coming up in case you've forgotten, guys, would run a story on the Virginia dating study and all the love. What they never quite got is that Dave had people in the study send them emails every week about the course of their relationship because he was studying their relationship. And when he got an email from them that said, oh, I guess I can't be in the study anymore, I just dumped my boyfriend, or I just got dumped by my boyfriend, Dave wrote back a very empathic email saying, gee, I'm sorry to hear that, but would you be interested in participating in the Virginia dissolution study? So we were able to enroll people right at the beginning of their breakup. And then we wanted to sample their emotions. We got diaries of love, anger, and sadness. And actually, Dave added feelings of freedom and autonomy. And but then we're afraid that if we just let them do this whenever they wanted to, that we'd get a biased sample of their emotions. Like some people would just fill out this form at the end of the day when they're back in their dorm rooms and feeling sad and so on. So what Dave did is he got a grant and gave everybody beepers that went off at random times of the waking day, emotion sampling method. So this is the study in a nutshell. You thought you were in a study of dating. You get dumped by your boyfriend. This guy who was supposedly studying your dating now wants you, gives you a beeper. Whenever the beeper goes off, you've got to stop, think about your ex, and talk about how much you love him, how much you hate him, how sad you are about things, and how free you feel. Cool study, huh? Cool study. Actually, what is it? I think it was the Discovery Channel did a story on it. Here's one of the things he found. So here's the theory. Here's the data from one subject. And this is not a highly statistical comparison I want you to make. And all I want you to think is that those data kind of look like the theory. Right? There's lots of bouncing around. Look at the anger is bouncing up and down here over time. You know, the sadness also is bouncing up and down, kind of in opposition to the anger. As time goes on, the emotions are starting to come into phase, right? As I said, in divorce, you need about maybe a year or two, maybe 2 or 3 years to get over divorce. A college romance, you need about 30 days. Right. So for participant number 1, actual data looks a lot like the theory. Now, though, we have a problem. Right? When a great theory is slain by lowly data, if you know that expression. Here is another participant. A pattern I call stuck on love. Different individuals didn't follow my graph. Foolish people. Right? Day 1, the circles are, it's cut off here on the slide, I'm sorry. Day 1. How do you feel? I love him. Are you sad? Yeah, I'm really sad. Are you mad? I could never be mad at him. Do you feel free? I'll never be free. Day 2. I love him. I'm sad. I could never be mad at him. I'll never be free. Day 30. I love him. I'm sad. I could never be mad at him, and I'll never be free. Let me ask you a highly complicated question. The lawyers get this wrong. Let's see if we can do better with the mental health professionals. Did this person get dumped, or did this person do the dumping? Dumped, thank you. This person got dumped, right? She has not begun her grieving, right? My theory isn't wrong, right? I don't think. The problem is that she hasn't killed the relationship, right? She hasn't started to grieve. She's going to go through those cycles somewhere, who knows how many months down the road, right? You know, the other person we looked at, this person's grieving on schedule, right? She hasn't gotten there yet, right? Okay. So there's different patterns, different ways of grieving. I get something I want to show you, then we'll go to the question. Because there's one more pattern that I want to show. I'm sorry, this one's cut off as well. I'll have to. This is a pattern I call gone. Okay. Day one. Do you love her? I like her. She's a nice person. Are you sad? Well, a little bit. Are you mad? Nah. Do you feel free? Well, I did just see a really cute girl in biology class. Right? Look at this. Day 3. Well, look, I got over this intense grief that I've been experiencing for 3 days. My sadness has plummeted. No anger. I'd like to be her friend if possible. But mostly how I feel is I feel free, I feel free, I feel free, I've got a date, I feel free. Right. Now, let me get you a question in 1 second. Again, it looks like my theory is wrong, but of course my theory is absolutely right. But we have the opposite problem, right? This guy didn't wake up on day 1. He didn't say, oh, I had a bad dream, I think I'll dump my girlfriend today. Right? This guy over here, 2 months earlier, saw that cute girl in biology class and said, oh God, why am I looking at her? Maybe I don't love Kimberly as much as I thought. Oh, no, that's an awful thing to do. She is awful rotten to me. I don't think I love her. Oh God, this is so sad that I can't be chasing after that girl in biology class. He's going through the ups and downs over here, right? And by the time he tells Kimberly that it's over, his grief is over. It's not that he's unfeeling. He's really a very nice guy. You just misunderstand him. It's different. Now, then I'll get to your question in a second. And here is the problem in divorce. The problem in divorce is that he is married to her. Right? He says, it's over. I want out of this relationship. And she says, out of this relationship, you're crazy. And she's so emotional all over the place. And he says, there you are, why are you being so irrational? We need to put our kids first, right? And she says, how can you be so cold and unfeeling? Didn't you ever love me? Where's your feelings? All you want to do is do business? You want to work out an agreement? What are you, nuts? They both are grieving, right? But they're grieving different losses, right? He's grieving the loss that we experience following a long and chronic illness. Now, this is familiar to you. I'm sure everybody has had an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent who's, maybe been in a nursing home, but has been sick for a very long period of time, right? And when that person dies, it's sad, of course. But if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit we also feel a little bit of what? Relief, right? He's lost his marriage to a long and chronic illness, right? He's wanted out for a long time, or she. But in this case, we'll keep it with a he. I find it easier to criticize guys. Her marriage, though, hasn't died as a result of a long chronic illness. Her marriage has been in a train wreck, right? And, it looks bad. Her marriage is in the emergency room, right? But nobody can tell her that it's absolutely over, that there's no hope, right? And if they do, she's not going to listen. And if you think about it, just like what do people do to doctors? Do something! You've got to do something, right? They're angry in the emergency room. What the doctors do. Why? Because they don't want to deal with the grief. The anger is they're warding off the grief. She's nowhere near killing her marriage, right? Her marriage isn't dead. Her marriage needs to be resuscitated. And when they talk with each other, they talk past each other. And, he thinks she's irrational. She thinks he's cold. He says, look, I don't want to go to court. We need to put our kids first. Let's get together over lunch and talk about it. He thinks he's planning a business lunch. She thinks she's going on a date. They go and they talk about it over lunch. And then when all he can do, he's there, oh, this is going pretty good. We're talking. So, yeah, we need to put the kids first. He's there. Well, so now are you ready to sign off on the agreement? Sign off on the agreement? What are you talking about? She's not going to admit to him that she thought it was a date. But they're on completely different pages. Right? Here's one of the big ironies in divorce, and it's central to mediation. The most important relationship to the success of mediation, to the health of children, is the relationship that has just ended, but hasn't ended. The relationship between two former lovers who remain parents. They need to find a way to renegotiate that relationship. And more times than not, the central dynamic for them is that one person has left the relationship, one person doesn't want it to end. They're in completely different places in their grief. They're in completely different places in how they want their future relationship to be. Right? He says to her, come on, you've had this said to you too. He says to her, gee, why can't we just be friends? We'll be friends right after the castration. That's when we'll be friends, right? So what's the solution? How do you deal with it? Here's mine. I say this. And one of the things that's different about mediation, and this is why you're looking at this, from doing family therapy, it feels like family therapy in fast forward, I'll have a flip chart. And oftentimes use it, and we're going to use this again in a second. But I'll draw on the flip chart. I'm not going to do it since we have it on the PowerPoint. I'll draw this up on the flip chart oftentimes. I'll say, look, relationships are like a river. You move from acquaintanceships or business-like relationships to, if you're lucky with some of those relationships, to true friendships. And then if you're really lucky, some of those true friendships become loving, intimate relationships. And that's what happened to you. But this river has a very strong current. And you can't swim upstream. You can't go from becoming lovers to being friends. You have to get out of that river and go back to the very beginning. The two of you now, we've talked about mediation isn't about trying to save your marriage. Mediation is about trying to save your parenting partnership. And that's what you two have. You don't have a relationship to resolve. You have a job to do. And your job is, as best as possible, is to raise these kids that you've showed me pictures of that you love so much. I don't want you to talk more. I want you to talk less. And in more formal ways, structured ways, just like business people do. Right? I don't want any more phone calls on Saturday night to see how the kids are doing. Right? I want us to set up a phone call every Thursday evening at 7:30 after the kids are settled down for you to talk for 5 minutes about the kids. I don't want any more long emails. And by the way, please stop copying me on them. Right? I don't want any more long emails. Right? Your emails are for very brief business-like information. You wouldn't send your boss a rant. And by the way, if you keep sending them to each other, I know they're going to end up in court sooner or later, which they do. Right? Keep them short to the point. Email is great for saying, hey, look, there's a school play coming up this Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That's about all that it's good for basic information like that. You need to be partners in the business of parenting your kids. This not only gives neither parent what they want, we're not friends, we're not enemies/lovers. It's a more distant, a more formal relationship that can work for the kids and also gives each of the parents time to grieve and adjust on their own and in their own way. Right. Because again, you're not going to be grieving with your ex. That's some of the issues there about keeping emails, about brief but pleasant communications in front of the kids, about not putting the kids in the middle, about really having very clear boundaries in your relationship. Right? You all know about relationship boundaries? Right? So boundaries are the rules of relationship that we really know are there when we violate them. So we all have like a boundary of interpersonal space, right? There's nothing here, there's no dot on this map. We didn't have a conversation about how close I can get to you, but I'm too close, aren't I? Yeah, that's right. Should have done this with a woman from Haiti who I was hitting on earlier, you know? In divorce, we don't know where our boundaries are. We need to make them clear, explicit. We need to make them businesslike. Right? And we're going from very intimate boundaries to very distant businesslike ones. In mediation, the goal in dealing with grief isn't to resolve it, it's to address it. It's to educate. A lot of times, I don't do this, you know, there was a reason I asked the wife in the case study to step out of the room. I gotta save face for this guy, right? He's not gonna admit in front of her that he's devastated. He can only do that in front of me. So we'll use caucusing, we call that, meeting alone with him, education, referral, but I'm not going to resolve anybody's grief in 6 hours of mediation. But I can at least turn on the light bulb. We can do that. And the same with other emotions behind anger, which I'm not going to have time to go into. What I want to do is jump ahead and talk a little bit about how I structure mediation to make this happen. Here is my overview of the first mediation session. This is a 2-hour-long session that follows a clear structure. And I'm going to focus really on the figure. The slides that follow go into a little bit more detail about what we're going to talk about in the picture. The first 2-hour session has 5 distinct components. The introduction to mediation. I'll start. I'll say thank you for coming here today. Right, whatever. There's 2 main reasons why I'm so happy that you made the step or follow the judge's order to come to mediation. One is this is really giving you a chance to make decisions yourself, because you may not like it, but some decision's going to be made, and it's up to you whether you're going to make a decision about what's best for your kids yourselves, or you're going to let some judge do this for you. Now, usually when people hear that gives them a little extra motivation to make decisions themselves. So that's part of the reason for saying it's also a reflection of reality. Some decision is going to get made. Oftentimes one of the parties doesn't want a decision to get made, but it's going to happen. The second reason, and this is a real reason I'm here, is for your kids. Is that, I know the 2 of you, I expect the 2 of you, I've just met you, I have no idea what's going on, but I expect there's a lot of hurt and pain and all kinds of feelings for the 2 of you, and I appreciate that. But the feelings that I'm really concerned about is your kids' feelings. And you're both your kids' parents. I have to assume that you love them. And what we're here to do is try to find a way to, even though terrible things have happened to you, in your relationship, to try to find a way for both of you to still be your parents to your kids. And I always come back to the kids throughout mediation. I set that rationale from the very beginning. I use that, as I said this morning, when I reflect back the tension I feel when they're fighting in front of me. I say, geez, if I'm feeling this way, I wonder how your kids feel. That's my constant focus with mediation, and it's honest. That's why I'm doing this. is trying to make lives better for kids in divorce. I then will do the contract to mediate that I talked a little bit about this morning, and you have a copy of, that talks about seeking legal advice, talks about the confidentiality of mediation, talks about fees. You know, one thing that I do differently that you'll see in there is, unlike therapy, I charge for time outside of mediation when I do this in my private practice. I charge for email time, I charge for phone time, and so on. Lawyers do that, and in mediation you need that extra time often. And then I set 2 critical ground rules at the very beginning. Parents haven't said anything yet. I'm talking now for 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning of mediation, or they've said next to nothing. And I say, look, I have a couple of ground rules in mediation. First of all, I want us as much as possible to focus on the issues at hand rather than the emotions behind them. You know, I expect you to have lots and lots of feelings. But what we're here to do is to sort out the issues. This isn't therapy. We're not here to resolve the emotions. It's like a loud rock and roll song. Right? When the music is so loud in a rock and roll song, you can't hear the lyrics. And when your emotions are so intense, you can't hear the words you're saying to each other. So one thing I'm looking to do is for us to turn the music down, right? And to focus on the lyrics as much as possible. Another ground rule that I have is that we're here to talk about the present and the future, not about the past. You know, unfortunately, I know stuff has happened in the past. And I'll have to know, I guess, maybe a little bit about that. But you should know that my constant focus is on what we can change. We can't change what's happened. We can change what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day, for you and especially for your kids. I fully expect these ground rules to be broken, right? But if you lay them out at the very beginning, you can say, remember what I said at the beginning? Could you please, focus on the issues rather than the emotions? If I haven't set that out at the beginning and somebody's in there and they think they're here to duke it out, 1, they're not prepared to shut down, and 2, they think I'm intruding on them. But if I set this out at the beginning, they're prepared for me to reorient them to the issues. They're prepared for me to reorient them to the future. I also say at the very beginning, too, I say, look, outside of here, you guys don't have to listen to me. But inside this room, I do expect you to respect my authority. And if I ask one of you to be quiet, if I ask one of you to step out of the room, I expect you to do that. I know this is going to be hard. If either of you needs a break, let me know. We can call a little time out, and you can go out and sit out in my waiting room and collect your thoughts. Okay. Those are my basic ground rules for beginning. Laid this out. I've talked now for about 10 or 15 minutes. People come in really prepared to argue their case, right? They think they're in the lawyer's office. They've got their grievances. This is what I usually say at this point. I'll say, and this is the way we handle it in the research, I'll say, you know what? I know you've got differences to things we've got to talk about your kids. But I told you, kids is really the main reason why I'm doing mediation. And can you tell me a little bit about your kids? You have a picture? You know, and then people start to pull out, well, in the old days, they pulled out their wallets. Now they pull out their phones, right? And they start showing you pictures of their kids, if you're lucky. I've had people actually who've brought in 8 by 10 pictures of their kids, put them on the off the table in mediation to remind themselves, me and themselves, about who their kids are and what they're trying to do. And in this very beginning part of the process, you're both starting it off on a positive note and reminding parents of their shared interests in their kids. We don't go on for long. Sometimes you'll say, you get a parent will say, oh, the kids are all screwed up because of what he's done. I'm there, no, I just want to know a little bit about what your kids are like, What are they into? What do they do? Try to make it a positive discussion that reminds them of their shared interests. So I'll do a little blocking. That's my goal, a short period of time. And then I will say, so what brings you in here today? Very often I will tell people, I want you to take turns, because if it's tense, you need to get the information. So I don't care who goes first, but I want one person to speak. I want the other person to please be quiet and just listen for now. Highlight the major issues. I'm taking notes like mad here, right? Although I usually know what it's going to be. Well, we got to sort out what the schedule's going to be. We need to do, he's thinking he could do all this stuff. Well, that's not going to work. We're going to have to go to court. No. And they're like, okay, so you've got an issue with the schedule, right? Okay. You've got an issue with some decisions about parenting. Right? Those are the main things. Well, yeah, but there's so much more. But, it's try to identify a small set list of things from each parent. And then I'll say, if I've done this in a structured way, letting each of them talk, I'll say, okay, kind of rules off, why don't the two of you talk about it? Talk about these issues. Occasionally, I will get a productive discussion. Almost always, I get a blow-up at that point in time. And it's expected, and that's fine. I wait for them to turn to me, and like the example I said, do timeout and I'll do a caucus. Half the time, I'm doing a caucus like the one I already demonstrated for you. In the middle here, where I'm talking to the lever in the left. I talk to the guy, he says he's hurt, he can't believe it. I say he's grieving, he's got to find a way to put his kids first, he's got to find somebody to support him in his grief. I talk with his wife alone, and she comes in and says, he's abusive and whatever, and I'm there, you know what, you're absolutely right. It's inappropriate the way he's talking to you. Has he done anything for you physical? No, nothing. There's nothing physical, but he's just emotionally abusive. He shouldn't be talking. I said, you're right, but there's maybe something else going on with him that you should understand. I don't want you to talk with him about it, but you know what? I think he's also devastated. And that's not your problem, that's his, but it might help you to understand what he's going through and to be a little bit patient with him on that. That's how a caucus will go. Sometimes I'll have a caucus that'll go like this. So here's in a case that maybe isn't like the one I role-played for you earlier. Doesn't seem to be as much emotional. My standard opening line is, I wonder if there's anything else you could tell me here alone that you didn't want to say in front of your ex, in front of your child's husband or child's mother or father. I almost always refer to people as the children's mother or father because I'm, again, trying to underscore that role in that relationship. In there, I'll get, if it's not something emotional, I'll get which is usually something emotional, but I'll get all kinds of things like, yeah, well, my lawyer sent me here because he thought maybe I could get a better deal in mediation, right? I get, well, yeah, and this is important information to know. I know some therapists aren't comfortable with this, but they say like, oh, yeah, you should know. Well, there's somebody else, right? And we wanted to be together. Next week, it's like, well, maybe you better slow down, right? You get all kinds of essential information. Again, mostly it's the emotional stuff. After that, we start to bring the first session to an end, but I'll always try to get the parents to negotiate on some small issue to get things, and to give them a feel of what's to come, and to end on a positive note. Oftentimes what that is, just to give you an example, is, so you said you haven't seen Johnny for 3 weeks since you moved out of the house. Okay? I'm wondering if between now and our appointment next Monday, if we can work out a time for you to just spend at least some time with Johnny. What do you think? Let's see if we can work something out. No, we're not setting a precedent. Let's just do something temporary. Let's try it out to try to end the session on a positive note. And then I'll bring it to an end and just say, I know you came in here and said you got issues with custody and all these kind of scary legal words, but what I really see as the real issue is that the two of you need to find some way to deal with each other as parents in the middle of your emotional devastation. And that's what we really got to try to find a way to do. Not that we have to kind of resolve the issues in your relationship, but we've got to find a way for you to at least work together as business partners. That's the first session. Question?
So this question me, you really obviously everyone else. In a mediation session, how does finding things out, like, okay, I want a divorce because I've got somebody else on the side, help you negotiate visits and camp money and, you know, I mean, I can,
Right, well, again, there's all sorts of variations, but it may be the reason that I don't want the kids to go with you is because you have the idea that somehow your new girlfriend is going to be raising my kids. And let me tell you, she's not going to be raising my kids. So you're not going to see your kids as long as you're around her. I mean, and so you say to him, hey, look, you're the dad, right? You've got to recognize what she's going through, right? These are your kids. Maybe this isn't the best idea for you. I know you're in love and that's a great thing for you, but maybe it's a little bit too soon for you to introduce your kids to your new girlfriend, and maybe it's too soon for your ex to see this happening as well. So that's how it might come out, right? Now, remember, we don't get 100% agreement. He doesn't always say, gee, I never thought about that, right? Because a lot of time tend to say, if you pardon the expression, sometimes men think with their little head instead of their big head, right? But I'm trying to get him to think with his big head, right? That's important. And really to put the kids first. Yes?
Do you usually start the mediation off with both parties in the room? And if not, when do you start off with them separated?
Yeah. I generally start with both people in the room. If, again, there's a lot of issues and concern about issues of power imbalances, and particularly issues of family violence. If anybody's expressed a concern about being in the same room prior to a first appointment, then I won't start off that way. A lot of programs will offer the alternative because of concerns, exactly those concerns of meeting alone. And it's also perfectly possible that if the tension is so great that they can't be in the same room, that we'll really do this shuttle diplomacy, that they're rarely in the same room. But my approach and the way I did it in the research and my typical approach is to start off with both people together. And then improvise, always do individual caucusing. How much is individual, how much is together, really is tailored for the individual couple. Again, it's part of asking for the emotional dynamics or affairs, and that is because so much of this is emotional, right? It's about feeling jealous. It's about feeling hurt, and that's what I'm trying to get to. But there is something that I want to, if I can go, you mind if I go, does it work if we go like 10 minutes longer before taking a break? Good. I want to show another thing that we do in mediation. First, there's a quick question. Yes?
When you say contract to mediate, is it a signed contract that they have to follow? I mean, there's certain rules that you stipulate on how mediation goes, but do they need to sign both of them?
On the contract to mediate, that's in, and hopefully there's a copy in your materials. That's all about getting legal advice. That's all about the issues of confidentiality. That doesn't include the focus on the present and future, not in the past. That's more verbal. The contract is more about the legal aspects of mediation. Right, that they're entering into mediation, and they do sign that. Right, exactly. And hopefully there's a copy for you. So I want to do a quick role play, if I could take 10 more minutes of your time before going to break. Much of what gets in the way are these emotional dynamics. Sometimes, though, there are just complicated problems. And I want to do an example of that. Once I get past the first session, I'm now in my second or maybe third or maybe fourth session of doing mediation. And let's say we have a couple that there isn't a obvious emotional dynamic. There's not some jealousy, there's not some hurt, there's not unequal grief. There's a complicated problem. I'll use the brainstorming technique. Are people familiar with brainstorming? The brainstorming technique? What I want people to do, the heart of brainstorming is I'll say to you, look, we've got a problem here. I want us to come up with as many options as we possibly can, right? I don't want to evaluate those options. I don't want you to evaluate them. Not now, we'll come back and doing that later. And in coming up with these options, I want you to be as creative as you possibly can. I don't want you to necessarily be realistic, because sometimes if you come up with crazy, unusual ideas, that opens the door to creativity. We come up with solutions that you never thought of before. Okay, so I think the most complicated, hard problem, unemotional problem in custody, co-parenting, is when somebody's moving away, right? It's complicated enough what sort of parenting plan, and we're going to talk about parenting plans after this break, complicated enough to decide on a parenting plan if you're living 15 minutes away from your ex. But what happens when something like this happens? Here's a real case that I had. Mom and dad had been divorced, legally divorced, for 2 years. They had one child, a little girl who was 8 years old. The couple had moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live and where I've done my research, 3 or 4 years earlier. And unfortunately, a couple of years after coming to Charlottesville is when their marriage broke up and they split up. They came to Charlottesville from Asheville, North Carolina, which is a beautiful town, just like Charlottesville is a beautiful town, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Had come and settled down in Charlottesville. Their little girl was thriving. She was a perfect example of a resilient girl. She was doing very well in school. She was spending, at this time, she was living mainly with mom, but she spent every weekend with dad, so he was spending a lot of time with her. You know, if mom wanted a weekend, she could have a weekend with her, but mom was working in a retail store, so she had to work a lot on the weekends as well, selling clothing or something like that. Dad had, after the marriage broken up, had found somebody else and had gotten remarried not too long ago, and this the stepmother was doing just like what stepmothers should do, is that she had taken more of the role of an adult friend. She wasn't stepping in and trying to be the mother to this 8-year-old. This 8-year-old has a mother and a father. She was trying to be an adult friend and a supporter of dad and his relationship with his daughter. The daughter seemed to like her, and actually the mother said that she got along a little bit better with the stepmother than she did with her ex, because she really saw that she was putting her daughter's interests first and not threatening her role. And the daughter was speaking well of her, and she could actually talk with the stepmom. Everything's going great. It's our perfect, resilient family. Except this. They had moved to Charlottesville for dad's job. Dad was like a middle-level, white-collar type worker, and worked for an insurance agency, sort of something like that. He had a pretty good job, but he wasn't making a ton of money. Not enough to give her a lot, although he was paying support and paid some spousal support as they had agreed, and it was fairly generous. Mom had been a homemaker when the child was home, but she was now 8 years old, so she wasn't a little girl anymore, and she's now a single mom, and she was realized that she's got to do better than working for minimum wage in a retail job. And what she had decided is she needed to go back to school, and rather than doing something silly like studying psychology, for example, she was going to do something that led to a good job in a short term. She was going to go back and get her RN. Right? Very practical sort of plan. In order to get her RN, she needed to get a basic high school biology and chemistry class, which she hadn't taken. But then she was going to enroll at, I guess, UNC Asheville, if I'm remembering right, to get her nursing degree. Oops. Well, it made perfect sense for her. Her parents lived in Asheville. She needed help raising the kids. She needed a little bit of financial support. They said, you can live with us for a while you get on your feet, although we want you to have your own apartment. They weren't smothering her or her taking advantage of them. Dad's parents also were from Asheville, North Carolina, right? And she wasn't vindictive. She says, you know, I'm happy to promote our daughter's relationship with your parents. Well, we're there. Very logical, thoughtful plan from mom's perspective. Not such a great deal from dad's perspective. Asheville, I don't know if I get this exactly right, but I believe the driving distance between Charlottesville and Asheville is like 7 hours. So it's not like you can do joint physical custody or even do weekends very easily. One other complication, and this comes up, and these are the things that as you get into mediation, you'll learn about some of these things. In the agreement, Dad, with his lawyer's advice, had a clause put into their separation agreement from 2 years earlier, right, that said, if Mom moves more than 60 miles away from Charlottesville, custody reverts to Dad. Now, actually, it's not clear whether a clause like that can be enforceable, because in the law, it's the judge, it's the state that has authority to make decisions in kids' best interest, and even contracts between parents aren't really enforceable. And so what happened with this family that was working well, they and then the lawyers were getting into a big argument about this clause and whether Dad was going to move or whether whether Mom was going to move or Mom was going to have to stay. One or the other. You got the problem? That's the problem. Tricky, right? Tricky problem. Join me. Let's brainstorm some possible solutions. All right? What I want you to do is to come up with ideas. I don't care if the ideas are crazy. Actually, if the ideas are crazy, I welcome crazy ideas. What I don't want us to do is to evaluate the options as we go along. I want us to see if we can fill up this board with ideas, with possibilities. Join me. Who's got an idea?
How about online classes?
Okay. Mom, Mom takes online classes. Okay, that's good. Yes.
Get a nursing program that's within the city where they're at.
Okay. Get RN in Charlottesville.
Dad can move, or
What'd you say?
Dad to move where she wants to go.
Okay. Dad moves. Okay. When you said that, somebody grunted. Right? Somebody grunted when you said that, which illustrates something, right? It's kind of easy for us to start to brainstorm ideas, but people in front of each other say, well, you can move if you want. That's hard to say. But I've said, anything goes. And she says,
We're focusing on what Mom's gonna do.
no, exactly. And she says, Dad moves. So that's good. Dad can move. And Dad can say, well, I can do that. And then, wait a minute. Dad says, what do you mean I can move? You know, I've got a job, I can't move. And then, wait a minute. We said we're not going to evaluate anything. That's good. Thank you, Mom. That's a good suggestion. That's a good part. Let's think about other things, right? Because we've set up that things that are hard to say are okay to say in this circumstance. So that's a good example. What else?
Let child stay with father while mother does her education.
Okay. So daughter stays with Dad for 4 years. And then back to Mom. Then back to Mom.
And back to Mom.
Okay.
If
Yeah, you can have the girl on vacation and then Mom during the school time.
Okay. So Dad, summer, Mom, school. Which practically oftentimes is the only solution that you can come up with. Say that again, that's not ideal that you put that out there. So if I get like you all are, I think you're maybe tired and wanting that break that I'm not letting you have, but I don't care. But if I get parents who aren't coming up with many ideas, I'll say something like this. Well, we could send your daughter to boarding school. I'm opening up ideas for creativity, right, when I say that, right? And what else am I doing subtly? Backdoor. I'm saying, wait a minute. This is hard. You're facing some tough decisions. But there are worse options out there, right? Come on, give me some ideas. If you want your break, give me some ideas.
The child can fly back to the dad. Like, let's say the child is mom,
Okay.
the dad can fly her back on the weekends.
All right, Don, fly back and forth. Good. We're not going to evaluate it.
They both can move to submit or.
There you go. Move to a note. There you go. Now we're warming up. Can move to a neutral location.
Put it out for adoption.
Oh, there you go. We'll call that the Aussie solution. Adoption for the daughter. Yeah, that's good.
See if father has family or friends in Asheville, then maybe you can go every 2 weeks instead of a week.
Okay. Dad stays with parents. Or we might, again, I know you want your break, so I'll give you, we might say, well, maybe grandparents, maybe both sets of grandparents could move to Charlottesville. I mean, stranger things have happened. We go through this. Well, I will let you have the break. Now, again, the two things, though, before the break that I want you to think about. One is, again, as I said, coming up with these options when the real people are in the room is a different feeling and a lot harder than when we're doing it. As I said to you this morning, this is a lot of time when I hear people, well, we could get back together. What, are you crazy? No, that's good. You know, that's a possibility. That's something to think about. It's an option. We'll throw that out. She wanted to try it, right? Maybe dad's willing to pay some more money. Maybe dad's willing to say, look, if you stay in Charlottesville, I'll pay for half your nursing school. But he's going to be cautious about saying that because how does he get out of that if there's some lesser compromise? Now he can say, I'll pay for the nursing school if you stay. That's one thing that I want you to pay attention to. The other, and this is something very different from doing family therapy. I said mediation's a lot like family therapy and fast forward. But look at us all. Look around the room. Where are you focused? Everybody's focused on the board. We've objectified the problem. You know, the parents in the room are now focusing, instead of looking at each other and focusing on each other, they've objectified a problem. It's out of their relationship and they're trying to solve it together. And you know what, I'll do a lot of that too. I'll be sitting down with the two parents in the room and I'll be sitting here scratching my head looking at the board. Right? You haven't got a problem. We have a problem together that we need to be creative. Just last week I had parents who were sure they couldn't work something out and the dad was looking at this, he said, how about this? And it was like, bingo, this solves every problem that you guys had. We never would have thought about it if we hadn't done this, if we hadn't had the board. So, anybody interested in wanting to know what actually happened? She was adopted, right, exactly, yeah. Yes, that's my daughter. No, so here's what happened, and this is absolutely a true case. And this relocation issue has come up a lot, and there's different ways of dealing with it. And, well, I won't get into it. And anyway, this is what happened. As a result of brainstorming over a couple of weeks, took a while to generate these options. But mom and dad agreed to this. Through the course of it, dad had raised the issue about maybe paying for things, right? Mom had raised the issue about dad moving. Lots of other possibilities came up, but they decided on this. Mom needed to take that basic course in biology and chemistry. Right? Dad agreed that if she took that course at the local community college in Charlottesville, he would both pay for the classes, which wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit of a help, and he would watch the daughter while mom was at school during night taking the classes, but he wouldn't make it an overnight. You know, the daughter would go back, whatever it was, 9 o'clock, whatever it was going to be in the evening, the class was going to end. He also agreed that if after, it was going to take a year, 2 semesters to finish the course, if after a year's period of time, mom still wanted to move to Asheville, he would no longer oppose the move. But what this did is it bought him another year with his daughter at a precious time in her life. And it also bought him a year to look for work, right? It's one thing, she's going to be gone now, and this is being yanked out. It's now I've got a year to plan and prepare for this. And the idea of moving to Asheville wasn't so unappealing to him if he had some time to do it. His family was there. He grew up there. It is a nice place. Now he had a year to do it. This is, though, how mediation ended. This was ended, it was one of probably one of the happier endings of mediation. She left the room first, and then he's shaking my hand, and he's there like, thanks, this really helped a lot. He said, but, you know what I'm really hoping, don't you? And I'm there, no, I don't, I can't read minds. He says, well, what I'm really hoping is she's going to meet somebody, going to fall in love, she's going to settle down, this whole thing is going to go away. And that was okay, Charlottesville is a small town. I run into lots of clients on the street. I never ran into them again. I think they moved at the end of the year. It could happen. A lot, though, more creative options that can come up than either move or don't move. And that's where we want to get to.